First-class tickets usually buy peace of mind, but for 72-year-old Bianca Rivera, a simple boarding pass ignited a firestorm of prejudice. Public humiliation at 30,000 feet is a nightmare no one expects. Yet, when an arrogant flight attendant forced this quiet grandmother out of her rightful seat, she made a fatal miscalculation. Bianca didn't scream or fight back. She just sent one single devastating text message. Airports are ecosystems of anxiety-rushing crowds and sterile announcements, but Bianca Rivera had always found a strange serenity in them. Walking through the sprawling glass corridors of John F. Kennedy International Airport, the 72-year-old widow carried herself with a quiet, unshakable dignity. She wore a meticulously pressed lavender pantsuit, her silver hair styled in elegant, neat coils. Her posture was straight-forged by decades of hard work as a high school principal and the unspoken requirement of a black woman of her generation to always present herself flawlessly to the world. Today was a special day. In her impeccably manicured hands, Bianca held a first-class boarding pass for Flight 482 to Los Angeles. It was a gift from her grandson, a high-ranking executive in a telecommunications firm, who had insisted that his grandmother travel in absolute comfort for her annual cross-country visit. She hadn't wanted him to spend the money, but he had waved off her concerns, smiling and telling her she deserved to be treated like royalty. As the boarding announcement chimed over the loudspeakers calling for premium passengers to approach the desk, Bianca gathered her modest leather tote bag. She offered a warm, genuine smile to the gate agent, a tired-looking young man who scanned her ticket. The machine emitted a pleasant affirmative beep. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Rivera," the agent said, handing the pass back. "Enjoy your flight." Stepping onto the jet bridge, Bianca felt a gentle thrill. The air grew cooler, carrying the distinct metallic scent of aviation fuel and conditioned air. She approached the massive fuselage of the Boeing 777, stepping through the boarding door into the hushed, softly lit sanctuary of the first-class cabin. Soft jazz floated through the air, and the scent of warm, mixed nuts and citrus air freshener masked the usual stale airplane odors. Standing near the galley was Colette Gonzalez. Colette was a senior flight attendant, a woman in her late 30s, whose uniform looked as though it had been tailored directly onto her body. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe lacquered French twist that defied gravity and aviation regulations alike. Her lips were painted a stark matte crimson, and her pale blue eyes swept over the boarding passengers with the calculating precision of a bouncer at an exclusive nightclub. Colette prided herself on knowing exactly who belonged in her cabin and who didn't. Over the years, she had developed a rigid internal hierarchy of worthiness based entirely on designer labels, expensive watches, and skin color. When Colette's eyes landed on Bianca, an immediate, subtle shift altered her posture. She took in the lavender pantsuit, neat but clearly off the rack. She noted the absence of a Louis Vuitton carry-on or a Rolex peeking out from a silk cuff, and undeniably she saw a senior black woman navigating a space that Colette unconsciously reserved for tech billionaires and Hollywood producers. Bianca checked the overhead markers, her eyes landing on the silver placard for seat 2A. It was a spacious, pod-style seat by the window, already stocked with a plush blanket and a premium amenity kit. Smiling softly to herself, Bianca hoisted her leather tote, preparing to slide it beneath the footrest. "Excuse me." The voice cut through the soft jazz like a scalpel, cold, sharp, and dripping with authoritative condescension. Bianca turned to find Colette standing uncomfortably close, her arms crossed over her pristine navy vest. The flight attendant's smile did not reach her eyes. It was a tight, muscular stretching of her lips. "May I help you, dear?" Bianca asked, her tone polite and even. "I think you might be lost." Colette said, the volume of her voice deliberately raised a fraction of a decibel, just enough to draw the attention of the businessman settling into seat 2B across the aisle. Economy seating is down the hall and to the rear. You need to keep moving so other passengers can board. Bianca blinked, mildly surprised but entirely unruffled. She had faced this specific brand of microaggression before, in department stores, in upscale restaurants, in bank lobbies. It was a tired, predictable song, but she never let it steal her rhythm. "I'm not lost, thank you," Bianca replied smoothly, retrieving her boarding pass from her pocket and holding it out. "My seat is 2A. I was just about to sit down." Colette didn't take the pass. She merely glanced at it, her jaw tightening. The physical evidence was right in front of her, yet her cognitive bias violently rejected it. A woman like Bianca simply did not fly first class on Colette Gonzalez's watch unless she was somebody's nanny, and Bianca clearly had no children in tow. "Let me see that," Colette finally snapped, snatching the card from Bianca's hand. She scrutinized the paper, staring at the bold black letters spelling out Rivera/Bianca and the prominent Class F. "There must be a mistake in the system," Colette declared, handing the ticket back with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Gate agents have been misprinting economy upgrades all morning. Our first-class cabin is completely fully booked for premium status members." The gate agent scanned it just moments ago. Bianca pointed out, her voice remaining perfectly calm. "The machine accepted it. My grandson purchased this ticket for me weeks ago." "Well, the machine is wrong," Colette said, her tone hardening. The polished veneer was cracking, revealing the raw, ugly arrogance beneath. She reached over to the intercom handset, unhooking it. "Please stand aside, ma'am. You're blocking the aisle and I need to sort this out. I cannot have you hovering in the premium space." Bianca stood her ground, her back straight. "I will stand aside, but I am not moving to economy. I have paid for this seat, and I intend to sit in it." Other passengers were boarding now, filing past the standoff. Some looked away, embarrassed by the tension. Others watched with undisguised curiosity. Bianca felt the familiar heavy weight of public scrutiny, the sensation of being a spectacle simply for existing in a space where someone had decided she did not belong. She took a deep breath, anchoring herself in the memory of her late husband's voice. "Never let them see you sweat, B. Your dignity is the one thing they can't take, unless you hand it to them." The boarding process continued, the aisle growing crowded, with passengers hauling roller bags and complaining about the lack of overhead space. Bianca stood patiently near the galley partition, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She was determined not to cause a scene, but she was equally determined not to be bullied. 10 minutes passed. Colette bustled about, greeting other first-class passengers by name, hanging up suit jackets, and offering pre-flight champagne in crystal flutes. She deliberately ignored Bianca, treating her like an invisible nuisance. Finally, a harried-looking man in a sharply tailored grey suit rushed onto the plane. He looked flushed, checking his phone frantically. He marched straight up to Colette. "Hi, Richard Hayes," he said breathlessly. "I was on the wait list for a first-class upgrade. The agent at the desk said someone might not show up, but they couldn't confirm it at the podium. Any luck?" Colette's eyes darted toward Bianca, and a cruel, triumphant gleam flashed across her face. "Mr. Hayes?" "Yes, absolutely." Colette gushed, her voice practically dripping with syrupy sweetness. "We actually just had a seat open up due to a ticketing error. Seat 2A is all yours. Let me take your coat." Bianca's eyes widened slightly. She stepped forward, breaking her silence. "Excuse me. That is my seat. There is no ticketing error." Richard Hayes paused, looking awkwardly between the impeccably dressed black woman and the smiling flight attendant. "Oh, I don't want to take anyone's seat if there's a mix-up." "There's no mix-up, Mr. Hayes," Colette assured him, her voice loud enough for the entire cabin to hear. She turned to Bianca, her expression hardening into a mask of pure, bureaucratic hostility. "Ma'am, I have checked the manifest on my tablet. Your ticket is a glitch. You are booked in economy seat 34E. I need you to proceed to the back of the aircraft immediately." "Show me the manifest," Bianca challenged, her voice dropping an octave, carrying the authoritative weight she used to command auditoriums full of rowdy teenagers. "Show me where my name was removed from 2A. Colette bristled her face, flushing with anger. How dare this woman challenge her authority in front of the premium passengers? "I am not obligated to show you proprietary airline equipment," Colette hissed, stepping closer to Bianca, invading her personal space in an attempt to intimidate her. "Here are your options. You can either turn around, walk down this aisle and take seat 34E, or I can call airport security and have you escorted off this aircraft for being unruly and failing to comply with flight crew instructions." The word hung in the air. Unruly. It was a loaded word. A dangerous word. Bianca knew exactly what happened to people who looked like her when they were labeled unruly by people who looked like Colette. She had seen the viral videos. She had seen the violent extractions, the zip ties, the complete stripping of humanity under the guise of protocol. If she argued further, if she raised her voice even a fraction, Colette would summon armed officers. They would not listen to Bianca. They would listen to the woman in the uniform. Bianca looked at Richard Hayes, who suddenly found his shoes fascinating, avoiding her gaze entirely. She looked at the other passengers, sipping their champagne, burying their faces in magazines, actively choosing to be blind to the injustice happening inches away from them. A cold, hard realization settled in Bianca's chest. She could not win this fight here in the aisle, screaming against the roar of the air conditioning. If she engaged, she would be painted as the angry, aggressive stereotype Colette was desperately trying to provoke. But Bianca Rivera did not retreat without a strategy. "You are making a terrible mistake, young lady," Bianca said softly. Her voice was devoid of anger, replaced by an icy, terrifying calm. "Seat 34E. Colette pointed down the aisle, a smug, victorious smirk playing on her crimson lips. "Have a pleasant flight." Bianca picked up her leather tote. She turned her back on the first-class cabin and began the long walk. It felt like a physical descent. Passing through the curtain dividing the classes, the soft jazz was replaced by the chaotic din of 100 stressed travelers. The plush carpets gave way to thin industrial flooring. The ambient lighting felt harsher, clinical. Walking down the narrow economy aisle, Bianca had to turn sideways to squeeze past people wrestling with their luggage. Every step felt heavy. She could feel the stares of the economy passengers, wondering why an elegant, well-dressed older woman was trudging toward the back of the bus with such a grim expression. It was a walk of shame, orchestrated entirely by a stranger's malice. She finally reached row 34. Seat E was a middle seat located exactly 3 rows in front of the rear lavatories. The smell of industrial chemical cleaner and stale air hung heavy in this part of the plane. To her left sat a teenager with oversized headphones, aggressively chewing gum and staring at a tablet. To her right, a large man in a stained college sweatshirt was already asleep, his arm heavily spilling over the shared armrest. "Excuse me," Bianca whispered, tapping the sleeping man's shoulder. He grunted, shifting his legs just enough for Bianca to awkwardly climb over him. She settled into the cramped space. Her knees pressed against the seat in front of her. The cushion felt thin and unforgiving. Her arthritis, triggered by the stress and the awkward contortion required to sit down, began to throb in her lower back. She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath of the recycled air. The humiliation burned in her throat, a bitter, metallic taste. But beneath the humiliation, a different emotion was taking root. It wasn't panic. It wasn't despair. It was absolute, crystalline resolve. Colette Gonzalez had assumed that Bianca was powerless. She had looked at an elderly black woman and seen a victim she could bully with impunity. She had wielded her modest corporate authority like a weapon, confident there would be no consequences. Bianca opened her eyes. She reached into her leather tote and pulled out her smartphone. The overhead speakers crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, the boarding door is now closed," the lead flight attendant announced. "Please ensure all electronic devices are set to airplane mode. Flight attendants prepare doors for departure and cross-check." Bianca did not switch her phone to airplane mode. Her hands, which had trembled slightly when she navigated the aisle, were now perfectly steady. She unlocked her screen and opened her encrypted messaging app. She bypassed her family group chats, her church friends, and her book club thread. She scrolled down to a contact saved simply as Austin. Austin Wright was not a casual acquaintance. 35 years ago, Austin had been a troubled, brilliant, highly at-risk teenager in the inner-city high school where Bianca was a newly minted principal. He had been suspended twice on the verge of expulsion, written off by the system as a lost cause. Bianca had refused to sign the expulsion papers. Instead, she had hauled him into her office, looked past his defensive anger, and seen a kid who just needed someone to hold him to a higher standard. She mentored him, tutored him after hours, and eventually co-signed his first college loan when his family couldn't afford it. Today, Austin Wright was the chief executive officer of Vanguard Holdings, the massive multinational conglomerate that owned the very airline operating Flight 482. Over the years, Austin had never forgotten the woman who saved his life. He called her on Mother's Day, sent flowers on her birthday, and practically begged her to let him buy her a house. Bianca had always declined his financial help, insisting she had everything she needed. She had never not once in 3 decades asked him for a favor, until today. Bianca typed with slow, deliberate precision. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't use emotional language. She stated the facts with the clinical accuracy of a legal deposition. "Austin, I am currently on Flight 482 to Los Angeles. A flight attendant named Colette Gonzalez refused to honor my first-class ticket, publicly humiliated me, threatened me with airport security, and forced me into seat 34E to give my seat to a white passenger. I complied to avoid being arrested. I am fine, but this cannot go unaddressed." She stared at the words for a fraction of a second, then hit send. The green bar slid across the top of the screen. Delivered. A moment later, the tiny text below the message changed. Read. Bianca didn't wait for a reply. She powered her phone completely off, slipped it back into her purse, and folded her hands in her lap. The die was cast. Outside the tiny window 3 rows ahead, Bianca watched the massive jet bridge slowly retract. The plane shuddered as the heavy tug vehicle latched onto the front landing gear. Slowly, agonizingly, the Boeing 777 began to push back from the gate. Up in first class, Colette Gonzalez was pouring a fresh mimosa for Richard Hayes. She felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Order had been restored to her cabin. The riffraff was in the back where they belonged, and she was surrounded by the elite. She smoothed her pristine uniform, smiling radiantly at a platinum cardholder in row 3. She felt invincible. The safety demonstration video played on the seatback screens, a cheerful animated pilot pointing out emergency exits. The engines whined, spooling up as the tug disconnected and drove away. The aircraft began its slow, lumbering taxi toward the runway. Down in the bowels of the airport, however, absolute chaos had just erupted. Inside the airline's operations control center in Atlanta, emergency alarms were flashing on the dispatch monitors. A direct, overriding command had just come down from the highest possible executive level, bypassing middle management, bypassing the regional directors, and landing squarely on the desk of the chief dispatcher. Halt flight 482 immediately. Ground stop. Do not clear for takeoff. Repeat, do not clear for takeoff. Back on the plane, the captain, a seasoned 20-year veteran named Miller, was running through his pre-takeoff checklist with the first officer. They were third in line for takeoff on runway 4 left. Flaps set to 15. The first officer called out. 15 set. Captain Miller confirmed, his hand resting lightly on the thrust levers. Suddenly, a sharp, urgent voice burst through their headsets on the company frequency cutting over the standard air traffic control chatter. Flight 482. This is dispatch operations. Abort taxi. I repeat, abort taxi. Hold your position immediately. Captain Miller frowned, exchanging a bewildered look with his co-pilot. Ground stops usually happened at the gate for maintenance issues or on the runway for weather. Being halted mid-taxi was incredibly rare. Dispatch 482, Miller replied, keying his mic. We are in the queue for 4 left. Are we looking at a mechanical warning? Negative 482. The dispatcher's voice sounded incredibly stressed. This is a direct executive order from the Vanguard CEO's office. You are ordered to power down engines and hold position. Port Authority Police and senior terminal management are dispatching to your aircraft right now. Captain Miller's blood ran cold. Police executive orders. He immediately slammed his feet on the toe brakes. Inside the cabin, the effect was instantaneous and dramatic. The massive airplane, weighing hundreds of thousands of pounds and moving at 20 miles per hour, jolted violently. Passengers gasped as they were thrown forward against their seatbelts. Overhead, bins rattled ominously. In the back, Bianca braced her hands against the seat in front of her, feeling the massive mechanical groan of the brakes. In first class, Colette Gonzalez stumbled, dropping a tray of empty champagne glasses. Crystal shattered across the plush carpet. "What in the world?" Richard Hayes muttered, gripping his armrests. The low hum of the massive Rolls-Royce engines suddenly pitched down, whining into silence as the captain cut the fuel flow. The ambient noise of the cabin disappeared, replaced by an eerie, heavy quiet, punctuated only by confused whispers. A moment later, the intercom crackled. Captain Miller's voice echoed through the cabin, lacking its usual calm, reassuring cadence. "Folks, this is from the flight deck. We have been ordered by corporate operations to halt our taxi. We are currently holding our position on the tarmac. I ask that everyone remain in their seats with their seatbelts fastened. We are expecting authorities to board the aircraft momentarily. We will update you as soon as we have more information." A wave of panic rippled through the plane. Passengers began frantically peering out the windows. Colette Gonzalez felt a sudden icy knot form in her stomach. She hurried to the galley phone, calling the cockpit. "Captain, this is Colette," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What's going on? Is it a bomb threat?" "I don't know, Colette," the captain replied grimly. "Dispatch said it's an executive order from the Vanguard CEO himself. The Port Authority Police are driving out to us right now with mobile stairs. Lock down the cabin." Colette hung up the phone, her hands shaking. Executive orders. The CEO, deep in the back of the plane, sitting in seat 34A, Bianca Rivera, slowly opened her eyes. The teenager next to her had taken off his headphones and was looking around in panic. The large man on her right was wide awake, muttering prayers under his breath. Bianca simply sat back against the thin, uncomfortable cushion, smoothed the wrinkles on her lavender pantsuit, and waited. Tension in a grounded aircraft operates like water behind a cracked dam. It builds silently until the pressure becomes unbearable. Inside the cabin of Flight 482, the silence was deafening. The air conditioning had been reduced to a low, inadequate hiss to conserve auxiliary power, causing the temperature to rise. Outside, the wail of sirens cut through the ambient roar of the bustling airport, growing louder and more distinct, until a fleet of emergency vehicles surrounded the Boeing 777 on the tarmac. Through the thick acrylic windows, passengers watched in bewildered terror as flashing red and blue lights painted the silver fuselage. A massive set of mobile stairs driven by a specialized airport utility vehicle lumbered toward the front left boarding door. It locked into place with a heavy metallic thud that reverberated through the floorboards of the entire plane. In the first-class galley, Colette Gonzalez's meticulously maintained composure was beginning to fray at the edges. She checked her reflection in the darkened window, smoothing a stray blonde hair back into her rigid French twist. Her mind raced through protocol. A ground stop with police intervention. Mid-taxi, it had to be a federal security threat, a fugitive, a bomb. Her thoughts briefly fleetingly darted to the elderly black woman she had banished to row 34. Could it be her Colette, wondered a twisted sense of self-righteousness blooming in her chest. Did she have a warrant? Was she on a no-fly list? The idea thrilled her. It would completely validate her decision to remove the woman from the premium cabin. It would make Colette a hero for sniffing out a threat. A heavy knock sounded on the exterior of the aircraft door. Captain Miller emerged from the flight deck, his face pale and drawn. He gave Colette a curt nod and threw the heavy mechanical lever, pushing the heavy door outward. 3 figures stepped out of the blinding tarmac sunlight and into the dimly lit cabin. The first 2 were Port Authority police officers, broad-shouldered, and heavily equipped, their hands resting cautiously near their utility belts. But it was the third person who commanded the oxygen in the room. She was a tall, sharp-featured woman in a tailored navy blue suit that cost more than Colette's annual salary. Pinned to her lapel was a gold badge bearing the highest tier of the Vanguard Airlines corporate logo. "Captain Miller," the woman asked, her voice projecting with practiced, undeniable authority. "I am Sarah Jenkins, Vice President of Regional Operations for Vanguard Holdings. We spoke on the radio." "Yes, ma'am," Captain Miller said, stepping aside. "The cabin is secure. We are awaiting your instructions." Colette immediately stepped forward, painting on her most helpful professional smile. "Ms. Jenkins, officers. I am Colette Gonzalez, the lead flight attendant. Whatever the security threat is, my crew is ready to assist in the extraction. If this is about the unruly passenger, I relocated to the rear of the aircraft earlier." Sarah Jenkins stopped dead in her tracks. She slowly turned her head to look at Colette, her eyes narrowing into cold, scrutinizing slits. She looked at the flight attendant, the way a biologist might examine a particularly unpleasant insect. "You relocated someone?" Jenkins asked her, tone dangerously soft. "Just a minor ticketing issue." Colette backpedaled slightly, sensing the sudden drop in the room's temperature. "A passenger attempting to occupy a seat she wasn't authorized for. Standard protocol, I assure you." Jenkins did not blink. She reached into her blazer and produced a sleek, titanium-cased tablet. "Officers," she commanded, not breaking eye contact with Colette. "Please proceed down the aisle. We are looking for a Mrs. Bianca Rivera." Colette's heart slammed against her ribs. The name echoed in the quiet cabin. "Wait," Colette stammered, the professional mask slipping to reveal genuine panic. "Bianca Rivera? The woman from Seat 2? The woman who purchased Seat 2A. Yes," Jenkins corrected her voice, now carrying the sharp crack of a whip. "Where is she?" She's in 34. Colette whispered, the colour draining completely from her meticulously powdered face. The two heavily armed officers pushed past a stunned Colette, parting the curtain that separated the classes. They marched down the long, narrow aisle of economy. The passengers already on edge shrank back into their seats as the police approached. In seat 34, Bianca Rivera sat quietly, her hand still folded in her lap. The teenager next to her had stopped chewing his gum, his eyes wide with fear. The large man on her right was pressing himself as far into the window as humanly possible. The officers stopped at row 34. "Bianca Rivera," the lead officer asked, his tone surprisingly gentle, contrasting sharply with his intimidating presence. "I am she," Bianca replied calmly, looking up at him. "Ma'am, we have been instructed to escort you to the front of the aircraft. Could you please bring your belongings and come with us?" A collective gasp rippled through the surrounding rows. People whispered behind their hands, smartphones covertly recording the exchange. They expected the officers to produce handcuffs. They expected shouting. Instead, the officer stepped back and extended a hand to help Bianca navigate out of the cramped middle seat. She retrieved her modest leather tote, thanked the officer politely, and stepped into the aisle. The walk back to the front of the plane was the exact inverse of her previous journey. This time Bianca was flanked by armed guards. The stares of the economy passengers were no longer filled with pity or confusion, but with absolute stunned awe. Who was this woman? What kind of power did she yield to stop a commercial airliner dead on the runway and summon a police escort? Bianca kept her chin high. She did not gloat. She did not smile. She simply walked with the heavy, unshakable grace of a woman who knew her worth long before an airline ticket tried to define it. As she passed back through the curtain and into the first-class cabin, the atmosphere was suffocating. Richard Hayes, the businessman who had eagerly taken her seat, was practically sweating through his designer suit, looking frantically for an exit that didn't exist. And standing near the galley, shaking visibly, was Colette Gonzalez. "Mrs. Rivera." Sarah Jenkins stepped forward, her stern expression instantly melting into one of profound respect. She extended her hand. "I am Sarah Jenkins, VP of Operations. I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for the distress you have experienced today. Are you harmed in any way?" "I am quite all right, dear. Thank you," Bianca said, shaking the executive's hand firmly. "Just a bit stiff from the walk." "Please." Jenkins gestured to the spacious leather pod of seat 2A. "Your seat." Richard Hayes scrambled out of the pod, as if the upholstery had suddenly caught fire. "I am so sorry," he stammered, backing away, his hands raised in surrender. "I didn't know. She told me it was a glitch. I swear I didn't know." Bianca offered him a brief, forgiving nod. "It's all right, Mr. Hayes. The issue was never with you." Bianca carefully settled back into the plush leather seat. The relief on her lower back was immediate, but her focus remained razor-sharp. She placed her tote bag down and looked up at the assembly of corporate power and law enforcement now crowding the front of the plane. Sarah Jenkins tapped a few buttons on her titanium tablet. A soft chime echoed from the device, and the screen blinked to life. "Mrs. Rivera, someone has been extremely anxious to speak with you," Jenkins said, turning the tablet so Bianca could see the screen. On the video feed sat Austin Wright. He was in his sprawling, glass-walled corner office in Chicago, wearing a dark, bespoke suit. The Vanguard Holdings CEO was a man known in the business world for his ruthless efficiency and icy demeanor. But when he saw the face of his former high school principal on the screen, his harsh features softened into an expression of deep, genuine concern. Mrs. Rivera. Austin's deep voice crackled through the tablet speakers. Are you safe? Did they put their hands on you? I am perfectly safe, Austin, Bianca replied, a warm, maternal affection bleeding into her voice for the first time that day. No one touched me. You acted very quickly. Thank you. Austin let out a long, shuddering breath, rubbing his temples. When I saw your message, B, I thought my heart was going to stop. I have an entire department dedicated to customer experience, an entire board of directors who preach equity and inclusion, and the woman who saved my life gets thrown to the back of my own airplane. His voice hardened, the momentary vulnerability replaced by a terrifying cold fury. Who did this? Sarah Jenkins turned the tablet, slightly bringing the pale, trembling figure of Colette Gonzalez into the camera's frame. Austin's eyes locked onto the flight attendant. Through the digital screen, his glare possessed physical weight. Colette flinched instinctively, taking a step backward until her shoulder blades hit the bulkhead. You are Colette Gonzalez, Austin stated. It was not a question. Yes, sir. Mr. Wright, sir. Colette stammered, her voice high-pitched and breathless. I can explain. It was a misunderstanding. The system... There are so many glitches with third-party booking sites. Stop talking, Austin commanded softly. The absolute quiet in the cabin made the order feel explosive. Austin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his mahogany desk. Ms. Jenkins, please read the digital audit trail for Seat 2A over the last 45 minutes. Sarah Jenkins pulled a secondary smartphone from her pocket. At 10:14 a.m., Bianca Rivera's boarding pass for Seat 2A was successfully scanned and verified at the gate. At 10:22 a.m., Colette Gonzalez manually accessed the manifest terminal in the forward galley. She executed a manual override, unseating Mrs. Rivera, categorizing the ticket as erroneous, and reassigning her to 34E. 1 minute later, Gonzalez manually upgraded standby passenger Richard Hayes into 2A. The evidence was empirical, undeniable. The digital footprints had trapped Colette in her own prejudice. There was no glitch, Ms. Gonzalez, Austin said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register. The system didn't reject her. You did. You looked at a 72-year-old black woman holding a verified first-class ticket, and you decided she didn't fit your aesthetic. You decided she was beneath you. You threatened her with police action to enforce your own bigotry. That's not true, Colette cried, tears finally spilling over her mascara, carving dark, ugly lines down her cheeks. I was just trying to protect the integrity of the premium cabin. People pay thousands of dollars. Mrs. Rivera's grandson paid $3,450 for that ticket. Austin snapped, slamming his hand on his desk, the sound making everyone in the cabin jump. But even if she had paid 3 cents, she was a guest on my aircraft. You do not protect my company by humiliating my customers. Colette was sobbing openly now. Her perfect posture collapsed, her hands clutching at the fabric of her navy vest. Please, Mr. Wright. I have 15 years with this company. I have seniority. You can't do this over one mistake. It was a lapse in judgment. It was not a lapse in judgment. It was a revelation of character, Austin replied coldly. You have 15 years of learning how to hide your prejudice behind corporate policy, and today you slipped. Austin leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of absolute finality. Ms. Jenkins, Austin instructed. Yes, Mr. Wright. Colette Gonzalez is terminated effective immediately for gross misconduct violation of corporate anti-discrimination policies and unauthorized manipulation of passenger manifests. Colette gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. A shocked murmur rippled through the remaining first-class passengers who were eavesdropping in stunned silence. Furthermore, Austin continued, his eyes never leaving Colette. You are stripped of your flight privileges. You will not fly as crew, and you will not fly as a passenger on Vanguard Airlines ever again. Ms. Jenkins, have the officers escort the former employee off my aircraft. No, please. My bags are on board, Colette begged, reaching a hand out toward the tablet. How am I supposed to get home? You can buy a ticket on another airline, Austin said smoothly. I hear the middle seats in the very back are quite affordable. The two Port Authority officers stepped forward, flanking Colette just as they had flanked Bianca moments earlier. But this time there was no dignity in the escort. Sarah Jenkins reached out and, with swift, emotionless precision, unpinned the gold Vanguard wings from Colette's vest. Walk, Jenkins commanded. Stripped of her authority, her wings and her pride, Colette Gonzalez turned toward the open cabin door. She had to walk past Bianca Rivera one last time. Bianca didn't gloat. She didn't offer a parting insult. She merely looked at Colette with a profound, quiet pity, the look a teacher gives a student who has spectacularly failed a test of their own making. Colette stumbled blindly down the mobile stairs, her sobs echoing across the hot tarmac, leaving the aircraft and her career behind forever. The heavy boarding door of Flight 482 swung shut for the second time, sealing with a definitive metallic thud that echoed through the eerily quiet cabin. Outside, the mobile stairs pulled away, carrying a disgraced Colette Gonzalez back to the terminal under the blazing mid-morning sun. Inside the Boeing 777, the atmosphere had shifted from suffocating tension to a collective, stunned reverence. Captain Miller's voice crackled over the intercom, lacking its previous uncertainty. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. On behalf of the flight deck and the entire Vanguard Airlines executive team, I want to issue a profound and sincere apology for the unprecedented delay and the distressing events that just transpired. We are cleared for immediate departure. Flight attendants, please prepare for cross-check. As the massive aircraft finally began its taxi toward runway, 4 left a new flight attendant, hastily promoted from the main cabin crew to cover the premium section, approached Bianca Rivera. He was a young man named Daniel, and his hands trembled slightly as he offered her a crystal glass of sparkling water and a warm, scented towel. Mrs. Rivera, Daniel said softly, his tone laced with genuine respect. If there is absolutely anything you need during this flight, please press your call button. It would be my absolute honor to serve you today. Thank you, Daniel, Bianca replied, her voice steady and kind. She took the water, her eyes crinkling at the corners. You just do your job the best you can, young man. That is all anyone can ever ask. The flight to Los Angeles was smooth sailing above the clouds in pristine tranquility. But while Bianca rested comfortably in Seat 2A sipping tea and watching a classic film, a massive, uncontrollable firestorm was igniting on the ground below. In the chaotic, hyper-connected age of modern air travel, nothing happens in a vacuum. During the initial confrontation in the first-class galley, a venture capitalist sitting in Seat 2C had discreetly propped his smartphone against his tray table, recording the entire exchange. He had captured Colette Gonzalez's condescending tone, her refusal to look at the valid boarding pass, and her veiled threats of police action. Simultaneously back in row 34, the teenager with the oversized headphones had been recording a vlog. He had captured Bianca's dignified silent march to the back of the plane, and more importantly, he had recorded the stunning moment when Port Authority police arrived, not to arrest the elderly black woman, as was so often the tragic narrative, but to escort her back to her rightful throne at the behest of the CEO. By the time Flight 482 reached cruising altitude over the Midwest, both videos had been uploaded to social media, The algorithm, hungry for outrage and justice, in equal measure seized the footage. Within an hour, the videos were cross-posted across multiple platforms. The hashtags Vanguard Airlines, hashtag Seat 2A, and hashtag Bianca Rivera began trending globally. Millions of viewers watched the blatant discrimination unfold, their blood boiling at Colette's smug face, only to experience a massive collective catharsis when the second video showed the corporate hammer coming down in real time. In Vanguard Holdings' Chicago headquarters, the public relations department was in a state of absolute unprecedented meltdown. Phones were ringing off the hook with inquiries from major news networks. The corporate communications director rushed into Austin Wright's corner office, clutching a tablet displaying a rapidly ascending graph of social media mentions. "Mr. Wright," the director gasped out of breath. "We have a catastrophic viral event. The incident on Flight 482. It's everywhere. Major news outlets are picking it up. CNN and Fox are both asking for statements. We need to draft an apology and spin this immediately before stock prices take a hit at the closing bell." Austin Wright sat perfectly still behind his expansive mahogany desk, his hands steepled beneath his chin. He looked at the frantic PR director with eyes as cold and hard as obsidian. "We will not spin anything," Austin commanded, his voice slicing through the panic in the room. "And we are not going to issue a standard sanitized corporate apology drafted by a legal team trying to dodge liability. Sir, with respect to the optics..." "The optics are exactly what they appear to be," Austin interrupted, standing up. His imposing figure cast a long shadow across the plush carpet. "A racist employee attempted to humiliate a woman of immense grace and dignity, a woman who, quite frankly, is the only reason I am sitting in this chair today instead of rotting in a county jail." Austin walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the sprawling Chicago skyline. "Draft a press release. I want it released under my direct signature. We will confirm that the employee in question has been terminated for cause. We will announce a full third-party audit of our premium seating and upgrade protocols. And you will include a direct, unedited quote from me. Vanguard Airlines failed Mrs. Bianca Rivera today. We allowed prejudice to masquerade as policy. We caught it, we stopped it, and we fired it. But the work to ensure it never happens again begins this exact second." The PR director swallowed hard, nodding rapidly. "Yes, Mr. Wright. Immediately." "And one more thing," Austin added, turning back to face the room. "Find out who authorized the system architecture that allows a gate-scanned, verified ticket to be manually overridden by a flight attendant without secondary managerial approval. I want that loophole closed globally by midnight, or heads will roll in the IT department." The digital shockwave continued to expand. By the time Flight 482 began its final descent into the Los Angeles basin, Bianca Rivera was no longer just a retired high school principal. She was a viral icon of silent, unyielding resistance. Internet sleuths had quickly identified Colette Gonzalez. Her social media accounts were flooded with thousands of angry comments within minutes, forcing her to delete her entire digital presence before she had even managed to secure a ride home from JFK Airport. The very public sphere Colette had tried to protect from Bianca had violently, irrevocably rejected her. Touching down at Los Angeles International Airport usually meant braving a gauntlet of aggressive taxi drivers and chaotic baggage carousels. But as Flight 482 taxied to the gate, Captain Miller made one final announcement. "Folks, we have arrived at our gate. However, I have been instructed to ask that all passengers remain seated. Mrs. Bianca Rivera will be disembarking first." A spontaneous rolling round of applause broke out in the cabin. It started in first class and rippled all the way back through the economy rows. Bianca, gathering her leather tote, felt a sudden flush of embarrassment. She had never sought the spotlight. She only ever sought fairness. But as she stood up, the passengers around her offered genuine smiles and nods of profound respect. Stepping off the jet bridge, Bianca was met not by the usual throng of waiting travelers, but by Sarah Jenkins, the VP of Operations, who had boarded the plane in New York, who had apparently caught a private corporate charter to beat Flight 482 to Los Angeles. "Mrs. Rivera." Jenkins smiled warmly, holding a massive bouquet of vibrant orchids. "Welcome to Los Angeles. Your grandson is waiting for you in the private VIP lounge. We took the liberty of collecting him from the main terminal." Bianca accepted the flowers, shaking her head in mild amusement. "You people certainly know how to make a fuss, don't you?" "For you, ma'am, it is the absolute bare minimum," Jenkins replied, gesturing toward a waiting electric cart. They bypassed the crowded terminals entirely, zipping through private corridors restricted to airline staff and foreign dignitaries. When the heavy oak doors of the Vanguard Diamond Lounge swung open, Bianca saw her grandson David. David Rivera, a tall, successful executive in his own right, looked entirely bewildered, holding a glass of complimentary champagne. When he saw his grandmother flanked by airline executives, his jaw dropped. "Nana!" David rushed forward, pulling her into a tight embrace. "What on earth is going on? My phone has been vibrating off the hook for 3 hours. People are sending me videos of you on the plane. The CEO of Vanguard personally called my office to apologize. What happened?" Bianca hugged him back, patting his cheek affectionately. "Just a minor disagreement about a seat, David. Nothing your grandmother couldn't handle." Later that evening, sitting on the patio of David's beautiful home in the Hollywood Hills, watching the city lights twinkle below, Bianca's phone rang. It was a secure private number. She knew exactly who it was. "Austin," she answered softly. "Bia." Austin's voice came through, sounding exhausted, but deeply relieved. "I wanted to make sure you settled in safely. David's home." "I am perfectly fine, Austin. And yes, David is hovering over me like a mother hen." She paused, looking out over the sprawling city. "You caused quite a commotion today." "I did what had to be done," Austin said firmly. "I watched the videos online, Bay. I saw how she looked at you. I saw how she spoke to you. It made me sick to my stomach. Austin." Bianca said her voice, adopting that familiar authoritative tone she used to use in her office 30 years ago. "Listen to me closely. I am proud of the man you have become. I am proud of how quickly you protected me. But I want you to remember something." "Anything," Austin said immediately. "Firing that young woman was necessary. She broke the rules and she treated a customer with cruelty. But firing her does not fix the disease. It only removes one symptom. If you truly want to honor me, you must look at your company. You must look at who you are hiring, how you are training them, and what kind of culture makes a woman in a uniform feel so empowered to strip a paying customer of their dignity." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Austin finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "We are implementing a new global directive tomorrow morning," Austin said. "It completely revamps our conflict resolution and bias training. We are hard-coding the ticketing software, so manual overrides in premium cabins require dual authentication from a gate agent. And internally, we are calling it the Rivera Protocol. Your name will literally be written into the foundation of how this company treats people from this day forward." Bianca smiled a quiet, satisfied expression. "That is a good start, Austin. A very good start. The saga of Flight 482 became a legendary case study in corporate management and modern social justice. It was taught in business schools as the gold standard for rapid, decisive executive action. Colette Gonzalez became a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the rigid, prejudiced hierarchies of luxury travel, serving as a permanent reminder that entitlement is a fragile glass house that shatters easily against the stone of truth. But for Bianca Rivera, the outcome was much simpler. She didn't care about the viral fame or the corporate protocols. She cared about the truth she had lived her entire life. Dignity is not assigned by a seating chart. It is not purchased with a premium ticket, and it can never, ever be taken away by those who refuse to see your worth. She had simply stood her ground, spoken her truth, and let the universe do the rest. And that's the incredible true story of how one woman's quiet dignity brought an entire airline to its knees. Bianca proved that you don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against prejudice is unshakable composure and knowing the right person to text. If this story of justice and karma made your day, hit that like button. Right now, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that standing your ground is always worth it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more unbelievable real-life drama stories.